I'd like to call this meeting back to order. Next, can we have a roll call, please?
Mrs. Dentino.
Present.
Mrs. Fritz. Mr. Gibbons.
Here.
Mrs. Gilch.
Here.
Ms. Gore.
Here.
Mr. Marks.
Here.
Mrs. Reese.
Here.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Here.
Mrs. Johnson.
Here. Can I have a motion, please, to approve the superintendent's approval of the minutes for the executive session, April 17th and May 15th?
So moved.
Are there any questions? Discussions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dentino.
Abstain on May 15th, yes on April 17th.
Noted. Mrs. Fritz.
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons.
Yes.
Mrs. Gilch.
Yes.
Ms. Gore.
Abstain on April 17th and yes on May 15th.
Noted. Mr. Marks.
Yes.
Mrs. Reese.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Abstain on May 15th, yes on April 17th.
Noted. Mrs. Johnson.
Yes. Can I have a motion, please, for board minutes, regular session, April 17th and May 15th?
Second.
Any questions? Discussions? Roll call, please.
Mrs. Dentino.
Abstain May 15th, yes April 17th.
Mrs. Fritz.
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons.
Yes.
Mrs. Gilch.
Yes.
Ms. Gore.
Abstain on April 17th and yes on May 15th.
Noted. Mr. Marks.
Yes.
Mrs. Reese.
Yes.
Mr. O'Donnell.
Abstain May 15th, yes on April 17th.
Noted. Mrs. Johnson.
Yes. At this time, we're going to open the floor to public comments for agenda items only. Would anyone like to speak on agenda items only? Seeing none, public portion for agenda items only is closed. Mr. Long, do we have a report of the solicitor?
Nothing at this time, Mrs. Johnson.
Thank you. Mr. Bilodeau, report of the superintendent, please.
Thank you, Mrs. Johnson. Members of the Board of Education, good evening. Under 6.1, I had asked, knowing that we have a meeting this evening on the Juneteenth holiday, I did ask from our Department of Curriculum and Instruction, Dr. Jeff Christo, to give us a brief presentation on the Juneteenth historical significance. So Dr. Christo, welcome to our meeting, and the floor is yours, sir.
Great, thank you. Is there sort of a preference for if they screen here, like kind of angle a little bit? Is everybody able to see that okay? And then we'll look at it, everybody go there. To see it, or to not see it, I guess, depending on what you think about it. This is Gentino, I'll tell you. You'll tell me.
Are the lights fine, Dr. Christo?
Yeah, I think that'll be okay.
Okay.
Anyway, the Board of Education, I thank you on behalf of myself and the history department for letting us have a few minutes to give a historical presentation here during the holiday. History teachers, we always love the opportunity to give some historical information. So. Second it.
Anybody's a power
Gotta be a 180.
Now we're in trouble. Here we go. At least in the air. He's doing the TV too.
All right, back in business.
All the educators here, we got 2 or 3 people helping you get ready for presentations. Thank you, everybody. I want to start by showing this picture. The history department like that. First-hand sources that are visual that students can really study. I think anyone studying Juneteenth. This picture is the oldest known picture of people who were enslaved the day that they gained freedom. It was in Galveston Harbor in eastern Texas. And you just look at the faces of the people. I just like to look at it and think what feelings and thoughts must have been rushing through their mind and their heads there. What struck me when I looked at it was there was some looks of happiness, but I think also some looks of just uncertainty of what's next in my life. Where I just try to think where each one of these people go. They're going to try to find work. They're going to try to find family members who they have lost over the years, or sold away, or were they just uncertain about how they would be treated even though they were emancipated. This day actually captures what we're celebrating on Juneteenth. So I thought it would be a really good opening thing for us just to kind of like think about. And this is the same place today, where exactly in Galveston, where there's a mural about everything that had occurred there, and then was. So that's sort of like in the past and then today. And I wanted to take 1 minute here. I'm just adding 1 minute because I actually thought this was something really important. And kind of why I'm here teaching about this today. And it's actually my mentor was one of the leading scholars of Black history. Who wrote the book on African American history here in the state of New Jersey, Dr. Gary Hunter. And just like kind of like an interesting story to tie this all together, I think, is he was my mentor. He's the person who showed me how to go to college, how to get financial aid, how to do well in college. I was somebody I didn't think I was really going to be successful in that. He showed me how, and I went in there and did the African American Studies program there. He was my mentor, and I always asked him, "What can I do to pay you back for everything you did for me?" He said, "Well, some of these little more obscure things like Juneteenth that I taught you. Can you pay that forward and make sure students out there learn about that? Because at this time in the 90s, it was more of an obscure holiday. And, now you guys are giving me that opportunity here at the district." And so that was, amazing, and I'm really happy to be here, kind of paying it forward. And that somebody who's such a scholar of these topics mentioned Juneteenth as something he thought people should know that they do. So I'm really glad to be able to present here and to work this, in our school curriculum. So, social studies trivia question. True or false? The Emancipation Proclamation freed enslaved people in the United States. Okay, so you think that and to yourself, what's the answer to that question? And maybe 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. I think every class will say, "Oh yes, absolutely. That was just like considered to be, a well-known fact of history." But in reality, the answer is mostly false. So the document, the Emancipation Proclamation, issued in September of 1862, resulted in the immediate release of somewhere around 25,000 enslaved people of African descent across the United States, which was a good accomplishment, but in light of there being over 3.5 million additional people still held as slaves, it really isn't, that document didn't really free the slaves, would not be a correct statement to say. In fact, it only emancipated people who were held as slaves in states that were in active rebellion against the United States. So it freed the slaves held in the Confederacy. As you can imagine, obviously this law, the Confederate leaders would not apply the law, so it really didn't have much effect. And specifically, kind of sadly, I think, it specifically exempted all the border states. So all border states, which were slave states who joined the Union, they were exempted. Slaveholders there were allowed to keep slaves. That would be as close here as Delaware, Maryland, Missouri, and West Virginia, the border states. The majority of enslaved people actually were emancipated only once the soldiers from the Union Army would go to a state or territory, take over that state, and then utilize the Union troops to go in and force the emancipation of the blacks held there as slaves. So, and that's really what Juneteenth is celebrating, and that's why that day is the most important, the mark of emancipation. And also noteworthy there, really the end of slavery was the passage of the 13th Amendment at the end of 1865, because they said even after the Union troops forced the emancipation all throughout the South, there were still slaves being held by force of law throughout those border states. So it really wasn't until the 13th Amendment that was passed. So, what is Juneteenth? So Juneteenth celebrates a specific day, which is June 19th, 1865. This is 2.5 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. It's when the Union troops finally reached deep into Texas, in that Galveston area that we saw in the opening picture there. Texas was sort of considered the last refuge of slavery, because as the Union troops went into the Southeast, so maybe we studied what happened in Atlanta, Georgia, and moving through, where the troops just came in and they were really just taking over, decimating everything, going through the South. Slaveholders who wanted to keep their power and keep their wealth would pack up giant caravans, including the people they held as slaves, and move west. And eventually, hundreds of thousands of people, mostly slaveholders and enslaved people they took with them, inhabited Texas, as everybody just started retreating, trying to find a place where slavery was legal. So in 1865, when the general finally signed an order saying the Emancipation Proclamation will now apply here in Texas, that was sort of the end of slavery in the Confederacy. And it was considered a great day of Jubilee where this had finally been accomplished. And just, I'm sure you know, I can't resist primary sources. So, when the general came, he had ordered printed several hundred from a printing press copies of the order that was freeing all the enslaved people in Texas. They were posted on churches, they were posted on town halls. Only one of them survived. So this is the last remaining document that really was there, and it's in the museum in Dallas. So that's General Order Number 3 by the general, which was putting the force of the Emancipation Proclamation into effect in Texas. And this is what Juneteenth is all about, and that's what it is. Next one, the other thing a history teacher can't resist, again, involving true and false questions. So, true or false, Juneteenth is a new holiday. So,
According to whom?
is that?
According to whom?
Yeah, well, yes, great question. So I put this up here because a lot of people said that, like, oh, Juneteenth, that's a holiday now? I didn't know what that was. Is that new? Did someone come up with that? When did they look back? And really the answer to that, I think, really has a lot of complexity and depth to it. So Juneteenth, the first celebration of Juneteenth was actually 1866. So that was the very next year was the first celebration of Juneteenth. There were many large celebrations. Again, like using these documents, there's the only remaining photo from the very first Juneteenth. See a band there playing. It was very much celebratory. People kind of always ask maybe about holidays, what's the correct maybe tone? Is it very reverent? Is it something you observe solemnly? And there's some aspect, but Juneteenth, ever since 1866, has had a very celebratory tone. It might have bands playing. It might have a rodeo was very common. I guess Texas, 1800s was probably the main form of entertainment. But there was a lot of jubilations, considered like a jubilee-like ceremony. But of course, I mean, there are other solemn parts. And that other picture is a very large parade that took place. And they say, and then here another common thing was to hold ceremonies to honor black troops who had fought in the Union Army and had actually been there, coming down to the South, freeing relatives and and people of color who were relatives.
Was it called Juneteenth at the time?
Yeah. So the first, it was called like Jubilee Celebration or Jubilee Day was the most common right there in the 1860s. Around 1895 to 1900 is when the name Juneteenth starts coming into newspapers.
Thank you.
So when that first started or where is lost to history, but that has been the name for quite a long time. Just to go over a little complexity, like nothing in history ever goes in a straight line. So 1866, we had the first celebrations. What you might know from studying 1877 was the beginning of an era known as the Jim Crow era. So this is an era when many of the positive things that occurred from those first 11 years after the Civil War went backwards because the Northern troops left the South, the control of the North and the South, and a lot of the people from the Confederacy were using power in their own states. A lot of times there were things passed called black codes that put severe restrictions on people of color from voting, from either gathering in public in some states, and it caused an end to a lot of the Juneteenth jubilation that had been occurring. So all between 1877 and 1930, some places Juneteenth celebrations were suppressed or outlawed, or gatherings were outlawed. In other places, this was also a time when people might be leaving the farm area, going to a larger city, starting to move north in the first wave of the Great Migration and losing some of the Southern traditions. So there was less Juneteenth celebration at this time. 1940s, Juneteenth comes back a little bit because it was often a date that was used to honor returning veterans from World War II in the Black community. So they fought in a Black unit or integrated unit, came back home on Juneteenth. Often the veterans would be celebrated. Then 1950s to 60s, somewhat counterintuitively, during this time there was very little focus on Juneteenth and maybe some of these things from deeper history. And it's counterintuitive to what I would have thought when I was first thinking about the spirit of the civil rights movement, but there was such a strong focus on voting rights and on integration into public places that it was almost like some of the historical celebrations were lost in, I guess, with this more laser-focused aim on making those changes during that time. By the late 1960s, we see a renewed interest in Juneteenth. In 1979, Texas makes it a state holiday. And that's the first time there's an official recognition of Juneteenth. And then finally in 2021, we're all probably heard this just recently, it became a federal holiday and is now celebrated all throughout the country. So kind of the history, I think, illustrates it's more complex than just it started here and got bigger. It's going back and forth, and it reflects history. And just finally, I say in our classrooms, which is very important here to all of us, so how does this translate for our students here at Gloucester Township School? So Juneteenth is a strong part of our 8th grade unit called the Civil War and Reconstruction. And particularly within that, we take a look at the holidays of this ending time of the year, starting with Memorial Day, which is Civil War Memorial Day, to Juneteenth, to the 4th of July. We talk about the historical roots of all those holidays, the current celebrations, and how we might look at them as all part of like a similar narrative. So that's something that we, for many years, have studied here in Gloucester Township history class in middle school as well. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you,
Very
Dr.
good.
It was very informative. Thank you.
Can you email us a copy of the presentation?
Yes, certainly.
Perfect, thank you.
Or 628.
Okay.
You want me to continue with my report?
Yes, please.
Okay. So, I would ask the board to consider consent resolutions for items 6.2A through 6.6W.
Can I have a motion to approve items?
So moved.
Any questions, discussions? Roll call, please.
Ms. Dentino,
Abstain from 6.6F, yes on the balance.
Mrs. Fritz,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons,
Yes.
Mrs. Gilch,
Yes.
Ms. Gore,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Yes.
Ms. Reese,
Yes.
Ms. O'Donnell,
I am abstaining on 6.6I, number 2963, and 6.6Q, number 3396. Yes on the balance.
noted. Mrs. Johnson.
Yes. This time, can we have the business administrator report, please, Mr. McCauley?
Yes, asking for the board's consent agenda. However, I would like to make a notation that on 7.4C, item A, There's supposed to be 2 attorneys listed there. One would be Cleary Jacoby, Alfieri Jacobs, and the other one would be Parker McKay. There should have been 2 listed there, making that notation for everybody. So asking for consent agenda approval of 7.1 through 7.7 T.
Can I have a motion, please, to approve?
Second.
Are there any questions?
I have a question on 7 on B, approval written wisdom.
Which one's that?
7.4B.
7.4B. Can someone find out who was involved in all that for me, please? Even though I am on curriculum, I don't know who was involved.
Any other questions?
I have a question on 7.6, B and C. Did we request those changes, or did they not fit it correctly?
7.6B and C. Actually, we requested both of them. The bid came in lower than what was intended. So B is waterproofing the concrete masonry below the actual. There's actually a roof is what they done, and the painting on the side, which was metal. And the only thing that was left was the concrete all around the building. So that's what 1 is. 2 is actually the building next door, which is house facilities, food service, all the offices for transportation. And this is still under the total amount allotted for the project.
Are there any other questions? Okay, can I have a approval or roll call, please?
Mrs. Dentino,
A no on 7.7M, yes on the balance.
noted. Mrs. Fritz,
Yes.
Mr. Gibbons,
7.7M, I'm gonna vote no. 7.4 C, G, no. Yes on the balance.
so that's 7.7 N as in Nancy,
M as in Michael.
and M as in Michael. And then 7.7 C and G.
No, 7.4 C,
7.4 C.
G.
Gotcha,
At least that's what I wrote.
Yeah.
gotcha. Noted. Mrs. Gulch,
Yes.
Ms. Gore,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
No on 7.7M, yes on the balance.
noted. Mrs. Reese,
Yes.
Mr. Donald,
No on 7.7M as in Mary. No on check numbers 130025, 130096. Abstain on check number 129879. Yes on the balance.
noted. Mrs. Johnson,
Abstain on check number 129864, 129967. No on check number 130096. Yes on the balance.
noted.
Thank you. All right, at this
All motions
time,
passed.
we are going to open the floor to public comments. Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Hildebrand is going to give us a presentation, please.
Thank you, guys. Good evening. So just want to go over our summary for what we did with our residency report this year. I need to give a big shout out to my staff, our residency officers, and my assistant Heather Wallace. They work tirelessly to look at these cases, find these cases. I got guys going out at 5 a.m. and some of them are stopping by houses at 9, 10 o'clock and seeing who's home. Heather does an awesome job behind her desk doing the research from the computer, finding stuff, giving them the information and sending them out. So we looked at 179 families this year. Through that, 99 of them did check out that they were our students and they were living where they were supposed to live. 10 of them we found were at a school in our district but should be attending another school in our district. We had 61 families that lived out of district but were attending our school district. When we broke down the date, the grade, and the program that they were in, and the time left in the school year, that saved us about $305,600. So if you look at the grand total, about 42% of these cases we looked into had something behind them showing that they shouldn't have been here or they needed to be at the correct school. So we have 9 active cases right now that we're looking into, and that'll probably pick up August once registration starts and keep rolling into those things. So if you guys have any tips and you hear anything, please let us know. We're always open to look into more things. So thank you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hildebrand.
Okay, so at this time, we are going to open the floor to public comments for any items. Would anyone like to speak? Yes. Could you give us your name and address, please?
Sure, my name's Amanda Dawson, and this is Sophia. We live at 14 Marshall Ave in Gloucester. Some of you may actually remember us and Sophia from a board meeting 2 school years ago. She was a cute little first grader who proudly stood up in front of everyone at the meeting and showed off her 2 life-saving machines. She has an insulin pump and a glucose monitor that she wears every day. And we were here while we were fighting to have her be able to have full-time nurse coverage in school. Thankfully, the board reconsidered the decision last year, and this year we were blessed to have Nurse Hornick step up and ensure that all of our GTES children, including the many medically fragile students that attend there, are safe and well cared for. Nowadays, Sophia is a smart and sassy 2nd grader. She's getting good grades. She's learning how to count coins. She's proud that she can spell dictionary, and she loves to make art projects. But what she can't do, however, is be responsible for calculating her own insulin injections or knowing when or how much sugar is needed when she's low. She can't even wash her own hair. She's 8. So it is imperative for Sophia to continue to have a trusted nurse in charge of her diabetes. Today, I'd first like to thank everybody who put our children's safety as priority and did hire Nurse Hornick to be our full-time nurse at GTS. She has years of real-life nursing experience that she now brings to our school setting. She's gone above and beyond for these kids and really shows that she's a truly gifted caretaker. For Sophia specifically, she gives insulin 2 to 3 times a day, wards off dangerous lows, and has even volunteered her own time to stay after school so that Sophia can participate in clubs. Sophia has a really great bond with her. I guess that's what happens when somebody saves your life a couple times a week. Last week, her nurse was pulled to go fill in at another school for a few hours. While she was gone, Sophia had a low blood sugar event that I could see from my phone at home. She was dropping very quickly. She gets 2 downward arrows on her machine, and it lets us know that we need to take immediate action. It has to happen in minutes, or she could pass out, and if not treated, she will die. So that's a quick thing that happens. It's not something to take lightly. Thankfully, I was able to frantically contact her teacher, who is not trained in diabetes and doesn't know very much at all about Sophia's treatment, and she was able to give her something to raise her blood sugar. As terrible as that all was, the actual issue is that when I respectfully emailed with some options to try to remedy this kind of situation for next year, information was forwarded to me from Dr. Martin and other medical staff that under no circumstances can my request be fulfilled to train a backup person at GTS in Sophia's diabetes care or any other really medical care. Only a nurse will be allowed. Which would be great if the nurse is going to be there all the time, but in this very same message I was also told that it is not guaranteed that a nurse be on the premises at all times. Someone is only promised to be there when Sophia needs lunchtime insulin, and that somebody will monitor her diabetes from a tablet from afar. Diabetes is a full-time disease. Her sugars need to be managed throughout the day. High blood sugars need to be corrected right away with insulin, not only at meal times. Low blood sugar can happen literally at any time and is an immediate danger. So what happens when there's a medical emergency? Something that happens almost on a weekly basis for us because diabetes is very unpredictable. And my daughter, who again is 8, is going to be on her own for that kind of situation. I don't think that that's okay. It's frustrating to feel that my simple requests that are necessary to keep her safe are being thwarted at every turn. Had I not intervened and had an untrained teacher aid my daughter last week, she literally would not be here. And that is why this is not the right plan moving forward for her and the other child at that school. I'd also like to mention that I have heard rumors about that the nurse who has now spent all the school year learning the specifics of Sophia's disease and all of the other medically fragile students at the school is possibly being moved. That means 3 new teachers, or 3 new nurses in 3 years at the school, which is a really risky, unnecessary and risky for the fragile children at the school. Additionally, I've communicated these concerns with Mr. Bilodeau today through email, and most of the board members. I think there are a couple up there that I don't think I had your email address for, so I'm sorry if you didn't get this information already. But today was supposed to be with Sophia at her cheerleading clinic, and instead we're here having to fight to make sure that she has everything that she needs to be safe in your school, and that shouldn't be. She should be able to be at her cheerleading clinic right now. I hope that you will consider this and make the right decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other person like to speak? Yes.
Hi, Tina Hendry, Somerville. Was late because I spilled coffee on me and I needed to get tea because I didn't want to see and address the coffee. I had a couple questions on the agenda. If I recall, during the budget, the Choose parking lot was $300,000, and now it's like $432,000 or something like that. Why such a big change? Like, it's not just like a $5,000, like, oopsies, it's like $100,000. It's like a house.
Actually, that's not correct.
It's not correct.
The Board of Education approved a resolution in the month of May authorizing district administration to approve a contract so we wouldn't delay the installation of the new parking lot. I believe the amount of money from that agenda was $600,000. The amount of money,
$300,000.
I'm fairly certain $600,000.
It's 300 in 2 years. It was 300 last year, 300 this year.
Okay, but did it say 302 years? Because I just, from what I recall from the agenda, said the approval and it said $300,000. It didn't say, I don't believe it said 2 years. I can pull it up, but I'm just wondering.
I think Mr. McCauley's correct. The funding sources are $300,000 from two
years.
budget years. But again, 300,000 times 2 is 600,000, which was approved.
So we're under budget.
Yeah.
Yes, and
Okay, that's fine then.
Yep, okay.
My other question I had was, your transportation, I believe it's like 7.5. Are these typos because we're approving the budget for 2022?
Yeah.
7.5.
A, B, and C.
It says October 3rd, 2022, September 1st, 2022.
Yeah. That's right.
So did
Sometimes
the
they-
board just approve something?
They come in very late because they're coming from different school districts.
So this happened and we already did it, but now we're approving it? I don't understand.
You can't deny the child access. So by the time it goes to one board, it's approved there. By the time it gets to us, there's bidding processes that go through. It does take time. Yeah.
Okay. Then the next question I had was the regular meetings. I see that the board has done a really good job in trying to not have the meetings the same day as council. So I do appreciate that. It looks like for January, February, and April, and May, it looks like that it is the same day as the council meetings. Was that, because council is typically the second and fourth Monday in the month? Was this a compromise that the board had, or it just happened to be that?
There's no compromise. This Board of Education has been meeting on Mondays for 70 straight years. All the records are in that room right there. You want to know how I know that? Because I pulled all the records out of the official minutes. I think that if anyone were to alter their day, probably would be down at Municipal Hall, since this board was kind of doing it first, but that's a little bit more of an answer than you needed, but no, we've always met on Mondays.
Okay, excellent. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes.
I have a question on Mr. Hildebrand's presentation, the amount of money saved, $305,600, how was that calculated?
It's a good question.
We take the kids' tuition rate, and it depends on what grade that they're in and what program that they're in. And then we divide it out with five days, and however many days are left in the school year. For elementary and for middle school.
Yeah.
And then kids with
Cost per student.
IEP.
Yeah.
Special education will have different rates as well.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions?
Lawrence, 2780 Road, Blackwood. My first question is this worth considering Juneteenth as a holiday, a federal holiday for our district? Is that something that you are considering or would consider?
Good evening, Drew.
Hi.
Welcome. Well, yes, I would say that discussion needs to transpire between the board and I. We are on the advent of cycling through the contracts, and there are several that have embedded vacations listed by date, by type. And I think when that occasion, that would be what I see as the most logical point to address Juneteenth.
But I've been with the district for more than 22 years, and I've seen a lot of changes in our school. Many of my colleagues and I have experienced a lot of disrespect, verbal abuse, abusive language, and other abusive behaviors from parents. And it's gotten increasingly worse over the last 2 years. So I know that we have a student code of conduct as a policy, and we have a sportsmanship code of conduct as a policy. And so I'd like to appeal to the board to make a statement to the community that you'll not tolerate the disrespect of any of your district employees by creating a parent code of conduct that essentially says, treat others the way that you want to be treated. And I have a little sample of what some other districts have put in place, so I'd be happy to share that with you.
Yeah, that'd be great, thank you.
My other area of concern is with cell phones. Cell phones are a horrible beast in our schools. And now with the capabilities of recording and videoing and taking photos, these kids are masters. They're masters at it. And it really does put every employee at risk. You don't know when they're recording or anything. And I would like to know if the board would be interested in considering something like cell phone pouches, where the students would put their cell phones in a pouch, a district issued pouch. When they come in, it gets locked. Pouch stays with the student all day. And then at the end of the day, they return to their advisory and they have their pouch unlocked. That way, they don't feel like we've stolen their phones because the phone is with them all day, but they don't have access to use their phones. So I would just like to know whether or not it would be something that the board might consider, something like that to keep the phones, keep the students from having access to using their phones throughout the day. They have Apple Watches, they have everything, everything. But it does really put the employees at risk because you never know when they're recording or you're trying to have a conversation. They're in our office and there are other things going on in the office and we have students sitting and waiting to see a principal and they're recording what's actually happening in the offices. So, you know, it's just something for consideration.
Certainly, thank you.
One more.
Okay.
One more, and that has to do, well, actually two more. One has to do with access, building access. We have, and room access. We use a key fob system to access the buildings, but we use keys to access all the classrooms. And the keys are expensive, from what I understand, to replace. And you have people moving from building to building, and you have to try to track down keys, and then you order keys and you have to wait and you don't get them. And so I was wondering whether or not the key fob system that we currently have is something that we could extend to all of the classrooms and make it have your key fob that gives you access to the building, and it also gives you access to any classroom that you go in. It also gives you an opportunity to see what teachers are going into the classrooms and when they're going in, or aides or whatever. So it's just an idea I could throw out. And
Sounds expensive.
the next thing, last thing, I promise, is the preschool program that we have. It has grown and is still growing. And I'd like for the board to consider having the preschool have their own secretary, because all of that additional work has been thrown on the school secretaries, and it's a lot of extra work. And it also doesn't really give the preschool parents a chance to make a connection, because by the time those preschool parents are coming in, they're coming in the midst of all the other craziness that's happening within the middle school. So I'd just like to ask the board to consider hiring a secretary for the preschool program and have the access to the preschool where the preschool is located, and not have them have to access the through the main office. What happens is when they have to access through the main office, you have to call the preschool, find somebody in preschool, and wait for them to come all the way up the hall through the 8th grade hallway to get the student. And sometimes there are 2 or 3 students. We have to make them take 2 or 3 students back at one time, all the way back to the preschool. So if they had their own access, it would be a lot easier.
Okay, thank you. We will certainly look into
All right.
these. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak? Seeing none, public portion is now closed. Is there anyone for board member comments?
Yes, I have some stuff. Mr. Bilodeau, for Miss Sophia,
Yes, ma'am.
can we find a reasonable solution that works for everyone? Some conversations happening?
Yes, I would expect that I'm going to reach out and speak to Sophia's parents.
Perfect, appreciate that.
Okay.
I also wanted to, and thank you, Miss Sophia, for coming. I am so sorry that you had to miss your cheerleading. That sounds like a lot more fun. So I appreciate you being here. Mr. Bilodeau.
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know if you're just tired of hearing me speak, or maybe you just agree, but I honestly appreciate the wage increases that I have been begging for 6 years on the agenda this month.
Can I say yes to both those comments?
Yes, I agree. And I appreciate the
No.
board who has also listened to me complain regarding, we have 30-year employees that make minimum wage. I never have to say that again. And the gap between new hires and the employees that have been here 30 years, like, it was really the right thing to do. And I appreciate that. I was gonna touch on other things, but nobody came to speak about it, therefore I'm done. Thank you.
Anyone else, board members? No? All right, can I have a motion to adjourn, please? All in favor?
Aye.
Oh, aye.
All right, where did that come from over there?
Everybody.
Anthony and Kia.
Anthony,
Oh.
yeah.
Oh, we all do it
Kia
together.
was 1 and Anthony was 2.
Yeah.
You're 2 into 1.
Okay. Thank you for coming.
Trying to find that thread.
All right, I thought-
Cool.